listen to me. Forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation with that person. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Anna. If you're new here, welcome. And today we are talking all about forgiveness. This is a video that I've been wanting to film for a while, and so I'm really excited to dig into this topic. I'm just gonna jump straight in. Forgiveness is something that I honestly feel like the Lord has been teaching me a lot about over the last almost a year now. I guess 9 months ago, I went through a season of just a lot of being hurt by people and just having to walk through and deal with all of those emotions that kind of come after a betrayal, and really learning what forgiveness means, what forgiveness is, and how important forgiveness is, not for the sake of them, but for your own mental sake. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is actually from Lisa Turkhurst, who has a book called Forgiving What You Can't Forget. I highly recommend reading that book. I haven't even read the whole thing, but it's absolutely amazing. And so that's where a lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes from, is her. The thing that I want to talk about with forgiveness is for your own sake. Forgiveness is the only way that you can sever yourself and separate yourself from the suffering that that other person has caused you. It's not for their sake, it is for your sake, and to be able to set yourself free from the suffering that they caused you. Forgiveness is the precursor to freedom. Forgiveness is both a decision and a process, and that was something that I really had to learn. Growing up, it was always kind of like, you know, somebody hurt your feelings or took your toy or whatever, right? And it was like, you say you're sorry and you forgive them, and it was just kind of like, that's it, right? Like, you move on. But as we get older, as we're talking about, you know, forgiveness within relationships and with people, that's a decision that you have to make immediately in the moment, and it's also a process. This is her like 3 steps. We make the decision by listing out the facts of what that person did and choosing to forgive them for those specific things. So something that I did, and something I encourage you to do if you're walking through a season where you're really having a hard time forgiving someone and you're really letting bitterness fester in your heart over that person, is I sat and I wrote out a letter that I was like, you did this, and this, but that no longer has a hold on me. Just really taking the time and processing through the suffering and pain that they put you through and listing it out on paper, and then choosing to forgive them for those things. And then the next thing is we embark on the process by repeatedly forgiving them for the emotional cost they have caused each time it comes up. So I sit there, I write this list, and I forgive them for those things. But then days, weeks, months later, something will trigger that emotion again. Maybe I will see something that reminds me of them. Maybe I've run into them before. Maybe it's just like a song. It could be anything, right? That like triggers that emotional reminder again. And that's when, again, like that bitterness is going to take root again. You're going to get angry. You're going to start feeling that emotional cost and that emotional pain that they brought on you. And that's the process, is that's going to come up again, you know, days, weeks, months later, and you're going to have to choose again in that moment to forgive them again. The last thing is, whatever my feelings won't cover right now, the blood of Jesus will. And that's so important to remember, is I have this, you know, bitter feeling in my heart that I can't shake, that I'm angry with this person, that I'm hurt with this person, and I'm having a very hard time forgiving them right now. And that's where the grace of God comes in. That's where the blood of Jesus on the cross comes in. The human heart has a tendency to turn hurt into hate. Bitterness comes from that. We're hurt by someone and we turn that hurt into a hatred for that person. And that's where bitterness takes root. Bitterness is a seed. Bitterness is a seed that if planted in the rich soil of forgiveness, it can bloom into something beautiful. That's what we have to do. We have to plant that seed of bitterness, not in the soil of anger and hurt and hatred, because that's where it's just going to fester and eat away at us and destroy our lives. We have to plant it in the soil of forgiveness, because there it will bloom into a beautiful life, because we will be free from that hurt that that person caused. Most of us don't know how to forgive because it's more than just saying I'm sorry. Like, that's what I was saying, is we grow up thinking like forgiveness is just like, I'm sorry, it's okay, I forgive you, and then like you move on. When we're talking about like deep hurt, deep betrayal, deep relationships, like it's so much more than that, and it's so much harder, because you're going to have those feelings of hurt that they caused you, and that's going to, your natural human tendency will be for that to turn into hatred for that person, and that's when bitterness is going to just completely take over your life and destroy your life. And that's not fair, because in doing that, you're letting the hurt that that person caused you control your life, and they don't deserve that. Like, they do not deserve to have control over your life in that sense. Forgiveness is setting you free from that. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about forgiveness failure. Forgiveness failure is that mindset where it's like, okay, I've written out all these things, I've forgiven them all these things, it's fine, I've moved on, and then days, weeks, months later, something comes up, something reminds you of it, and you're suddenly filled with this bitterness and hatred in your heart from the hurt that they've caused you. So this is what Lisa Turker says: when we are reminded of the cost of that person's actions days, weeks, or months later, forgiveness failure is realized, because we are driven by the bitterness in our heart. This bitterness is what causes us to dream about retaliation that we may never carry out, but so desire to hurt that person back. That is so true. So true. And I know this is like a much deeper, hard subject, but this is so important. When we're hurt by that person, and then weeks or months later, we realize that forgiveness failure, we're driven by that bitterness. We're driven to talk about how horrible that person is. We're driven to just be angry at that person. I'm driven by this bitterness that all I want is to retaliate and hurt that person back. Even if I may never carry it out, I have 100% sat and been like, how can I get back at them just to make them mad? And that's forgiveness failure. Let's talk about revenge, because revenge is also something that comes with bitterness. You want to get back at them, you want to be angry with them, but revenge is paying twice for a hurt that someone else did to you. I am the queen of wanting revenge. I always am like, how can I get back at them? How can I, blah, blah, blah. You may think it'll make you feel better, but it's only going to make you feel better in the short term. It's not going to make you feel better in the long term. You're going to think, oh, instead of forgiving them, I'm just going to get back at them. That's going to give you very short-term satisfaction, not long-term freedom. Bitterness is such a powerful thing. Bitterness likes to move into the places of your life where there's loss. When you lost a relationship with that person, no matter how hurt or by that person you may be, no matter how much you feel like you hate them, like, you are still losing that person. And so there's a grieving process behind that too. That while you're hurt and while you're angry and while you're bitter, you are also very sad and very grieved because you lost that relationship. And that's where bitterness moves in. Bitterness moves into the places of loss. Bitterness at first looks like it's protecting us. It's keeping us from feeling those feelings of loss. It's keeping us from feeling all of those things so deep. But the problem is that bitterness then takes over and wants to be our only feeling, our only emotion, so that then we hate that person for the rest of whatever. And that's not okay for you. Like, you are going to destroy yourself if you live in that bitterness. That's why forgiveness is so important. So there are 3 blessings that can come from bitterness. Bitterness doesn't mean you're a hard-hearted person. It means that you loved deep and therefore you hurt deep. The second one is bitterness is not an indicator of a limitation in building relationships. It actually moves into people who have their arms open big and wide and trust big, but then have their hearts so deeply hurt. And then the third one is bitterness is not an indication of a fundamental flaw in your heart. It's actually an indicator of rich potential, because you are so loving and trusting that then you are hurt. And bitterness likes to set up there. Okay, so talking about specifically forgiveness now, we've addressed the bitterness. Forgiveness does not, listen to me, forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation with that person, because sometimes they don't deserve it. Sometimes they do, and sometimes it does mean reconciliation, but sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, and that's okay, because they don't deserve that. Forgiveness is for you, it's not for them. Forgiveness is a command by God. Reconciliation is a choice that should be made depending on the circumstances. Forgiveness is for the purpose of our hearts and not theirs. Forgiveness sets us free from the suffering that they've placed us in. Stop suffering from what other people have done to you, and the only way to get to that place is through forgiving them. That doesn't mean that you have to wait till they apologize or realize what they've done wrong. It can happen now, and it's your right to free yourself from their chains of hurt. Forgiveness doesn't have to wait for justice. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciling with the person. Forgiveness means setting your heart and yourself free from the evil seed of bitterness. So I know this was a more serious video than usual, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to talk more about it, definitely leave me a comment below. Don't forget to follow me over on Instagram. I'd love to chat with you more. It's just @AnnaKaylin. And don't forget to live in grace and love with grace. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.